Hello everybody! Today we're going to make homemade garlic knots, just like you would get from a pizzeria or an Italian restaurant. They're delicious, they're easy, and we're going to use the bread machine to make them even easier. So first, the main thing we need to get started, first of all, is a basic bread recipe. This is one of my favorites. I use it often. I use it for garlic knots. I use it when I'm making stromboli, and a lot of times I use this when I'm making pizza as a pizza crust. So it's a very versatile bread dough. This is just bread flour that will be in the dough. We're also going to have some milk. I happen to have whole milk. Whatever is fine. We're going to need a little olive oil. We're going to need some yeast. Okay, I buy this in bulk by the pound, but during the pandemic, this is how I had to buy it. So I still have a little bit left. It's stored in the refrigerator. You're going to need salt, and you're going to need just some regular run-of-the-mill sugar, which it's just going to take a teeny bit. So I just have my sugar bowl here that we use for coffee and tea. And you're going to need some water. Okay, that's all you're going to need for this regular dough recipe that we're going to put into the crock pot. So first of all, you have 3/4 a cup of warm water plus 2 tablespoons, okay? And you're going to warm it. I use the microwave. I find my tap water doesn't get hot enough. We want our water to be between 70 and 80 degrees. Now, you can see mine is 115. We also need 2 tablespoons of milk at that same temperature. So I'm going to put my 2 tablespoons of milk in just to kind of try to bring my temp down a little, as it's right out of the fridge. There's 1. There's 2. Oh yeah, we're coming down. We're coming down. Let's give it a stir. We're down to 107. 108. That's okay. That'll drop a little bit more in no time. We also need 3 tablespoons of olive oil. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this too, because this is room temperature. It'll bring down the temp a little bit. All of these liquid ingredients go in as a base into your bread machine. Every bread machine I've ever had, and you put the wet ingredients, then the flour and some dry ingredients, and then sugar, yeast, salt separated. Definitely follow your instructions on your bread machine, but I found quite a few, and that seems to be the general rule of thumb. So we're down to 107. We're just going to wait for this to drop a little bit, and then we will continue. So our liquids are finally to the right warm temperature between 70 and 80. We're at like 78 right now. When I pour it into this cooler metal, it's going to drop it a little more. So it'll be just fine. And then the bread machine will, heat it and take care of that. So here we have the 3/4 a cup plus 2 tablespoons of water. We also have 2 tablespoons of milk, and we have 3 tablespoons of olive oil, all between 70 and 80 degrees, and that just goes as our base layer here in our bread machine. Okay, now to this we're going to add 3 cups of bread flour. Now, back in the day, before I did a lot of baking, all I ever had was all-purpose flour. And if that's all you have, you can still make this recipe. You may find your dough will be a little too moist. You may need to add a little more flour. You're going to have to watch it in the bread machine and just add as need be. It's especially formulated with using bread flour. Okay, but you can make it work. So to this, we're going to put our next ingredients in 3 of the 4 corners. So first we're going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of sugar. And I'm going to put that right here in this corner. Okay. Then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. The idea is right there. And then the yeast, you know, they say you can make a little nook for the yeast and put it in that corner. I don't do that. I just put it in the corner. Works out fine for me. So we've got a half a teaspoon of sugar, a teaspoon of salt, and we're going to do 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. And then, there's my clock. We're going to take this, and this is the bread machine insert. We're going to put this into the bread machine. I'm going to bring it over here. Here is my bread machine. And what we're going to do is we're going to put it on the dough setting. So your bread machine should also have a dough setting. It's not going to cook the bread. Wouldn't it be great if there was like a setting? Garlic knots, and it made them into knots and everything all for you. But no, we're just going to use the dough setting, and honestly, that's what I use the most when I'm using my bread machine. I use my bread machine to make dough for cinnamon rolls. I use it to make pizza dough and stromboli dough and all sorts of dough. So it's in there, it's secure in. We shut the lid, we power it on. Beware, it sounds like a smoke detector whenever I set it. And we push start when it goes off. So 1 hour and 40 minutes, our dough is going to be all ready to go for our next step. And we don't need to worry about this. Occasionally I do peek in, make sure things are stirring up just right. So I'll bring you back for a little peek after a while to show you what the dough all incorporated together should look like. And then at the time we will also go over the ingredients we need to turn these into garlic knots. Alright, so we're back with the ingredients that we will need to turn this dough into scrumptious garlic knots. And what you're going to need is a stick of butter, which is 1/2 cup or 8 tablespoons. Okay, you're going to need 1/4 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. I have used actual shredded Parmesan cheese before, and that works too. The grated does stick a little better, but the shredded is nice as well. So 1/4 cup of that. This is 3 tablespoons of minced garlic. I'm using jarred minced garlic, but you could press your own. I think the flavor is a little better when you press your own. A tablespoon of dried parsley, a teaspoon of salt, and approximately a tablespoon of olive oil. We're going to use this while we're forming our garlic knot, so it's give or take. You may not need the entire tablespoon. So what we're going to do is we're into this small saucepan, we're going to put the stick of butter, and we're going to put the garlic, and we're going to put it on over low heat, and we're just going to cook it until the butter is melted and the garlic is starting to become fragrant and tender. And then we're going to take it off the heat and just set it aside. Okay, now I do this when my dough is in the machine preparing itself. You can do it when you're rising your knots. It's up to you. That is what we're going to do. And like I said, we're just going to do bellow. Now I'm going to bring you over here to take a look at our dough progression. Nice ball. That's how it should look. Okay, it should be clumping together, popping around. It's been at it for 12 minutes. And here's a little Pennsylvania treat for you today. It's a winter wonderland here. Beautiful. So we will come right back when our dough is finished, and I'll teach you how to form the knots. Our butter and garlic are now fragrant. And so I'm just going to turn this off, set this aside, and we won't use this again until our knots come out of the oven. Okay, here it is. We just have a couple more minutes on the rise here. You can see it's a lot larger than it was. As soon as the timer goes off, I'm going to lay it out here on a cutting board, lightly dusted with flour. And I like to use a pizza cutter to cut my dough. And after we're finished forming the garlic knots, we will put them on the silicone mat, which is on top of a cookie sheet. And then we will allow the garlic knots to rise. Now this silicone mat looks horrific. I've actually had this, I don't know, maybe 15 years. I have 2 of these and I love them. I would love a bigger one because I have some jumbo cookie sheets that I use a lot. But I used to hate baking cookies and breads and buns and biscuits and things before I owned one of these. And then after I owned them, it just changed my life. Nothing sticks. It all just comes off super easily, which I'll show you when we're all finished. Care is very easy. You just do, hot water, sometimes a little bit of soap if you have really stuck on. I know it looks terrible, but it's fantastic. Love it. So now for this step, while we're making the garlic knots, we will only be using the olive oil and a little bit of salt. The parsley, the butter with the garlic, and the Parmesan cheese will be reserved for once the garlic knots are completed with their baking. Okay, so I have my dough on my cutting board. You don't have to use a cutting board. You could use a just your counter, but I am using the cutting board because I use the pizza cutter to cut the dough. So I don't know if you noticed, I just took a small piece of dough. I took a little olive oil on my fingers, just a little, and I just kind of rolled it out. I've got about an 8-inch long piece of dough now. I'm just going to take it and knot it and lay it on my cookie sheet. So the piece of dough you're looking for, you want approximately a ping pong ball sized piece of dough. You will then just kind of roll it between your hands. And this dough has a great elasticity. It's very easy to work with. Nothing perfect, nothing fancy, just put it in a knot and lay it on the cookie sheet. You may not need olive oil each time. Okay, I'm going to continue doing this and fill up the cookie sheet, and then I will show you what we've got. All right, and here we go. I squeezed these all onto one tray. As you can see, they're not exactly cookie cutter perfect, and that's okay. Also, I'll show you the olive oil. I didn't use very much, just very little. And now we're going to take our salt and just kind of sprinkle it over. And what we're going to do is we're going to allow these to rise 30 minutes. Covered with a tea towel. I'm just going to cover them and try to keep them warm. And 30 minutes we'll come back and we will pop them in the oven. The garlic knots have now risen for half an hour. A little bit fluffier than they were before. We're going to pop them in the oven. They go in at 400 degrees for approximately 20 minutes. We want them to be light golden all over. And I will show you what they look like when they're finished baking. Here we are, all baked. These ended up being in about 25 minutes. What we're going to do is just toss them all in a bowl, and you can see they just come right off. No sticking, no issues like that. And that's the silicone mat. So here they are, all in the bowl. And here is our butter that we cooked a while back. We heated it up. And we're just gonna dump that on top. Now the knots are hot. This butter has cooled. But the knots are hot. So this is gonna just kind of melt all over when I pour it on top. And now to this, we're gonna sprinkle our Parmesan cheese right across the top. And that was a 4th Parmesan. And a tablespoon of parsley. Now we're just going to toss it around. Now as the rolls kind of cool, the butter is going to kind of absorb into the rolls. They're still going to have a little crunch to the exterior, but they're going to absorb that garlicky butter, and the Parmesan, the parsley and the Parmesan are going to kind of cling to the garlic knots. So you end up just a beautiful garlic knot. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe. It's a family favorite of ours. Please check out my other recipes and my other videos, and please subscribe.